Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast. I am your host, Professor Chris G, and this is another episode in the Pokemon Adventures podcast. So, last week, we read Chapter 1. So, I'm going to give you a small recap and some little cliff notes to kind of catch you up to speed on what happened last week right before we get into this week's episode. So last week we were introduced to Red. Red thinks that he is the greatest Pokemon trainer ever until these kids told him, hey, have you talked to Professor Oak? Because apparently he taught his grandson how to be one of the greatest Pokemon trainers ever. And he went across seas and he's back in town. He's like, wait, what? I'm the greatest Pokemon trainer. I know everything, kids. But maybe I could learn a little bit from this Professor Oak. And then he runs into Team Rocket, and Team Rocket is looking for this mysterious phantom Pokemon who we end up finding out is Mew. And when he finds Mew, Mew is in a battle with Blue. And Blue sent out his Charmander. And Charmander went in, and Blue was like, oh man, this Mew is way too strong. Charmander, come back. Which sent Red off into a heated rage. And he's like, whoa, what are you doing? You almost had that Pokemon. And he sends out his Poliwhirl. And he tells his Poliwhirl to use Water Gun on this Mew. And Mew comes back and just shocks the mess out of Poliwhirl. And then flies away, knocking out one-hit KO to Poliwhirl. And Red's like, oh man, that thing was strong. And Blue, in so little words, is like, what were you doing? I mean, if you were watching me battle it, I mean, didn't you see that this Pokemon is a lot stronger? And that's why I called my Charmander back? Huh, idiot. And he's like, maybe next time you should study the person that's battling a little bit more before you go and try to intervene. And he just walks away. And we go to the next morning, and Red walks in front of Professor Oak's lab. And he's like, maybe he is right. But I'm not going to just say he's right. I'm going to go and figure this out for myself. I'm going to go and talk to this professor. This professor could make me the greatest Pokemon trainer ever. So he walks up to Professor Oak's door and he rings the doorbell. And he's just ringing it. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. And then he's like, wait a minute. The door is open. And that is where we left off. So, everybody, to bring, so now that you're all up to speed, we're going to get ready and jump into Chapter 2. And Chapter 2 is titled Bulbasaur Come Home. And remember, Ash, or I can't say Ash. So Red, he has two Pokemon that we know of right now. He has a Nidorino and he has a Poliwhirl. And his Poliwhirl is still knocked out from the previous battle. So we start this week's chapter, Chapter 2, Bulbasaur Come Home. And he walks into Professor Oak's lab. And it's dark. There's no lights on. And he's like, oh, wow. I had no idea there were so many Pokemon. What's this one? And he picks up a random Pokeball off of Professor Oak's desk. And he looks at it. He's like, a Bulbasaur. He's like, it has a bulb on its back. Cool. Look at this, Poliwhirl. And Poliwhirl kind of wakes up. So it looks like Poliwhirl is starting to heal up. I guess the overnight sleep might have done it some good. I mean, we just saw that Poliwhirl was knocked out, but Poliwhirl is now awake, and Red is showing Bulbasaur inside of this Pokeball to Poliwhirl. And what I want to everyone to know, so if you're following in the Pokemon manga series, so if you're following, these Pokeballs are a little different than the Pokeballs that you and I know. These Pokeballs are clear Pokeballs. The Pokemon actually shrink and they go into these Pokeballs, and you can see the Pokeballs from the outside in. So you know what Pokemon you're about to send out. And the Pokemon can look through the clear top and look through the Pokeball as well. And Bulbasaur starts to shake. He's like, and then all of a sudden we hear, and the door is opening behind Red. And Red's like, and there he is, Professor Oak. And Professor Oak's like, you, pokey thief. And Red's like, whoa, wait, no, I mean, and he trips back, and then he hits the counter that Professor Oak's computer is on. He's like, no, you idiot. And Red's like, what? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all of the Pokemon that were on the counter, all of the Pokeballs open. So it looks like Red hit a button and released all the Pokemon in Professor Oak's lab. Boing! And in this frame, we see a Kakuna, a Pidgey, a Caterpie, a Metapod, a Rattata, a Poliwag, a Tentacool. Let's see, is there anything? A Weedle we see. And Professor Oak and Red both are like, eee! So Professor Oak looks over at Red. Now look at what you've done. And Red's like, I didn't mean to. And then we see a Pidgey just fly over. Vroom! And then Pidgey just Pidgey takes a poop on Professor Oak's face. And now Professor Oak is just angry. He has poop on his face. And Red's like, yuck. And Professor Oak's like, just get them back. So Red goes chasing after all of these Pokemon. He's like, okay. And then we get a frame that says later, much later. And he's like, how many more? Red goes, and Professor Oak's like, don't tell me that some of them escaped. And Red's like, I'll go out and get them. And Professor Oak grabs him by the jacket. He's like, oh, no, you don't, pokey thief. And Red's like, but I'm sorry. I came into your Pokemon lab uninvited. I'm sorry. I let your Pokemon loose. Ouch. And then Professor Oak is like, but we've got to get them back, or it's too late for that. So it looks like Red's like, but we got to get them back, and then Professor Oak is like, it's too late for that. It'll be dark before we find them all. And Red's like, we can't just give up. I'm going after him. And then Red runs out, and then we see Professor Oak on a bike. Ching 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 is what's in the frame. And he's like, you think you can do it all by yourself, huh? You won't know what to look for. And Red's like, all right. So Professor Oak is on this bike that looks like it's 3 times too small for him. And he's like, and after we get them all back, you'd better believe that I'm turning you in. And Red's like, yes, sir. We go to the next frame, and it says that we are now in Viridian City. And in this frame, we see a drawing of Professor Oak, Red, and a Meowth. And Professor Oak is like, here, kitty, now! And Red throws the Pokeball. gotcha. Only one left. And they caught the little Meowth, and the little frame of Meowth is it's so cute. I mean, it's just a little fat cat. It doesn't look like the Meowths that we have now, but it's just a little fat cat. You know he's eating well. And Professor Oak is like, phew, if I'd known I'd be chasing them all day to Viridian City, I'd have decided I'm too old for this. And Red's like, the last one is Bulbasaur. And Professor Oak, he's like, yes, but that one. And Red's like, there it is. And Bulbasaur just starts running away. And they're like, it's going in there. And then we see a shot in the next frame of the Viridian City gym. And Bulbasaur is running right into the Viridian City gym. And they're like, hurry! And they take a look inside the Viridian City gym. And they walk in, uninvited, might I add. I mean, Professor Oak just got mad at Red for trespassing. And what is he doing? He is trespassing. But I guess if you're a professor, you can go wherever you want. But if you're a little kid, you can't go wherever you want, which kind of makes sense in the Pokemon world, I guess. And they're like, where would it go? And then Red looks up and sees a statue of Giovanni. He's like, yeesh. And then we go to the next frame, and Bulbasaur is kind of looks like it's cowering over against the wall, but also looks like it has a mean look in its eye. And Professor Oak is like, oh, ho, ho, there you are. Come to daddy, little. And then Bulbasaur goes in for a tackle and just tackles the mess out of Professor Oak's stomach. And we go, boom. And Professor Oak, now really, I'm your trainer. And Bulbasaur's like, Saur. And then we go to the next frame, and Bulbasaur looks a little confused. And Red's like, don't be afraid, Bulbasaur. And then he kind of walks close over to it. Of course you're nervous. It's the first time you've been outside. And Bulbasaur looks up at him. You were kept separate from the others in the Pokemon lab, weren't you? I'll bet you've never seen anything living. I bet you've never seen another living thing besides the old professor, huh? And Professor Oak is like, And he goes over and he starts petting Bulbasaur on the head. Yeah, that's a good boy. Are you hungry? And then as he's petting Bulbasaur, we hear Professor Oak, Bulbasaur, and Red look behind. And then all of a sudden, we see a Machoke. And it's a big Machoke. And it's towering right over Red, Professor Oak, and Bulbasaur. Or I said Machamp. It's Machoke. And they're like, it's a wild Machoke. And Machoke goes chasing after Red. Roar! And Red's like, oh no! And Machoke goes in for a punch. And it's at this point, Bulbasaur takes out a vine. And he's like, Soar! And just wraps its vine around Machoke's fist, which is going straight for Red's face. And it stops him from punching Red. And Red's like, Professor, did you see that? What's the Bulbasaur's best attack? And it's at this point that Professor Oak seems like he was knocked silly from an attack by Machoke, which we did not see in the frame. We did not see Professor Oak get hit, but it looks like he must have gotten hit. And so Professor Oak is dazed, and Red's like, oh, great. What's next? Wait, if it's got a bulb. And Machoke sits there and snatches its arm and breaks the vine that Bulbasaur was holding and goes to punch Bulbasaur and Red and punches a hole in the ground. Just, and Red's like, oh man, there's no way. And then there's a slight, he looks through the blinds and there's light coming through. He's like, wait, what if? I guess I've gotta. And then he's like, try this. And he opens up the blind and the light goes and shines onto Bulbasaur's nice bulb. And it's at this point that it looks like Bulbasaur is getting ready to gear up and use Solar Beam. And then Bulbasaur goes, Soar! And the Solar Beam hits Machoke right in the face. And then from there, Machoke is like, ah! And just falls straight to the ground. And just boom! Just face plant. So what level is this Bulbasaur? I mean, this Bulbasaur seems like it's gotten some type of training. And Professor Oak finally wakes up. And he's like, you knew about Bulbasaur's Solar Beam. And Red's like, nah, but I figured, plants turn sunlight into energy. And this guy has a plant on his back, so. And Professor Oak goes, you just figured it out. And Red's like, why is this guy laughing? He is an old kook. And he puts Bulbasaur back into its Pokeball. The Bulbasaur is yours. Seems he's taken quite a bit of a liking to you. You really mean? Cool! Professor Oak gives Bulbasaur over to Red. So Red now has a Bulbasaur, a Poliwhirl, and his Nidorino. Go to the next frame, and Red's like, but first, I've got to clear something up. I did not break into your Pokemon lab to steal that Pokemon. He's like, I only wanted you to teach me to be a better Pokemon trainer. You see, yesterday, and then it looks like he's going in to tell the story about Mew, because we get a frame of Mew in the field showing that he's telling what happened when him and Blue encountered Mew. And Professor Oak's like, I see. But do you know what it takes to be great? And Red's like, huh? Knowing a lot of clever tricks. Having a Pokemon powerhouse in your arsenal. Is that what you think makes a great Pokemon trainer? And Red's like, If you do, you're wrong. What counts is what's in your heart. That connection you have with the Bulbasaur. That feeling from deep within. That's the key to becoming a great Pokemon trainer. What's your name, son? And Red's like, my name is Red, sir. Here, Red. This is a Pokédex, an encyclopedia of Pokemon. Whenever you meet and learn about a new Pokemon, enter your data here. And Red's looking at the Pokédex. By the time you've input the data on all the Pokemon, you may well have become one of the truly great trainers. He's like, wow, me? One of the greats? Red, if you expect to input any valuable data into that Pokédex, you can't stay here. You have to expand your territory. Why not start with Viridian Forest, north of the city? You're bound to find Pokemon there that you've never seen before. Besides, that happens to be where... Never mind. And we see Professor Oak just laughing, and Red's like, wait, what are you talking about? And we jump to the next frame, and it looks like Red is walking and getting ready to start his adventure. He's like, oops, I was in such a hurry that I didn't bring very many Pokeballs. Oh well, these'll have to do. And then the last frame on this page, we see Red looking up at the Viridian Forest. we jump to the next page, and he's like, I don't know what kind of Pokemon we're gonna meet. And he takes the Pokeballs out of his pocket, and he's looking at Poliwhirl, and he's looking at Bulbasaur. But with that, Poliwhirl and Bulbasaur, we're bound to catch them all. And then it looks like he clicks the button, getting ready to release Bulbasaur and Poliwhirl so they can go and start their adventure. And that's it. That is chapter 2, everybody. I hope I'm doing a good job. This is page 34 in the Pokemon Volume 1 manga series. And now it looks like, we're not seeing Nidorino. So maybe Red gave Nidorino back over to the kids so the kids could have the Pokemon to make the kids happy. We didn't really see that exchange, but I'm starting to get that vibe because he has not brought out Nidorino, and the only Pokemon that he's acknowledging at the end of this chapter 2 is Poliwhirl and Bulbasaur. But it looks like he's getting ready to venture off. And where's Red's parents? We didn't get any screen captures of him going back home to tell his mom or his dad that he's getting ready to go out on this real big adventure. How old is Red as well? We don't even know how old he is. But it's at this point that we are going to conclude this episode. Like I said, I hope I'm doing a good job depicting this. Go ahead and leave some comments in the comment board wherever you are listening to this and kind of give me a little bit of feedback. Follow me on @PokeBreakdown on Twitter. I try to tweet as much as I can. I'll try to tweet schedules, when I'm going to be releasing episodes, what the episodes for the month are going to be. You'll also be able to see a few retweets from a few different sources. We do have one of our good friends, Pokemon Crossroads, on Twitter, and they like to tweet, and you'll see a little bit of interaction between me and that account. On there, they like to write and give us reviews, and any other Pokemon news threads out there that write about us, I like to retweet those and just to get our name out there. But those are our handles, everybody. Again, thank you for listening to chapter 2. Chapter 3 is titled The Secret of Kangaskhan, and that is where we are going to start as of next week. I don't have anything else to add this week, so I'm going to get ready to sign off. Thank you again for listening to this week's episode, and I will see you next week on another episode of the Pokemon Adventures podcast. A small short of the Every Pokemon Episodes Ever podcast. Thank you.